I like to start off with some easy questions that are just very comfortable. So how much money do you have?
How much money do I have?
Mhm.
That's an interesting question.
You don't have to answer it.
It's an interesting question.
You said I could ask you anything.
Yeah, I did. I'll just put it this way. I'm very financially free. Mm-hmm. So I have financial freedom. If I want to work, I can. If I don't want to work, I don't have to.
Amazing. How long did it take you to get there?
7 years.
7 years. Mm-hmm. So you weren't making much initially?
No, I was always making really good money. From the time I was 18 on, I've always made 6 figures plus. Mm-hmm. But I was always really good at saving, but I finally hired a financial fiduciary, and not to be confused with a financial advisor. I did start with that first, but then I found out about a financial fiduciary, and I really put together a hardcore plan. And Tony Robbins was actually how I found out about a financial fiduciary, doing Wealth Mastery. But I just honed in. It was like, I'm doing all of these vision boards. I'm a big vision board person. I'm doing all this for self-development, whether it's psychology or business. Why am I not doing this for finances? I want a vision board for finances. And I want a direction, because you can work yourself forever, but you're kind of like a rat on a wheel, really. If you don't really have a solid financial plan, you're just working to work. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a very good plan.
How do you make money now? Do you have multiple things that you're working on?
Yeah, I have multiple revenue streams. So some of them are within the adult industry, some of them outside. So whether it's rental properties or brokerage account, living on interest with that, being able to draw from that, investing in businesses, partnerships, maybe I own 5%, mm-hmm. So I'm kind of just getting that mailbox money.
Any that you're comfortable sharing what they are?
So I have partnerships with Sliquid Lube. So I have a lube called Sliquid Starr. There are toys geared towards males, like they're called male masturbators. Kiru. So there's the Feel Starr. So I have my royalties on those. And then I have my online platforms that I'm still making money on, as far as the Rachel Starr brand and content.
Great. And rental properties.
Yeah, rental properties.
That's cool. So we got in touch through Chase Hughes.
Yes.
It was on Monday.
Yes.
The episode is doing really well. I just checked on the drive here.
Awesome.
It's blowing up. So it's like 50,000 views an hour.
Speaking of mentors, he's definitely one of them.
Yeah. So why did you hire a government psyop brainwashing interrogation expert?
So I heard him on a podcast, actually. So one of my routines is wake up, have my coffee, and I like to get 3,000 to 5,000 steps in. Well, during that 3,000 to 5,000 steps, and it's just a walk around my neighborhood or whatever, podcast or audiobooks. That's my everyday routine. And he happened to be on the podcast that I was listening, and he was talking about his book, The Ellipsis Manual. And he was, the admin to getting past somebody's gate guards and taking off that mask and really being able to have resources and tools to see behind the mask. We all wear masks, not even to a certain extent. I mean, just flat out, we all wear masks. There's a mask that we wear in front of our mother-in-law. There's one that we have in front of our boss. There's, one when we're out with our friends, right? And I'm not saying that we just live in constant masks and we're never genuine, but there's masks for different things. But what if you ever need to see past that mask? Mm-hmm. And that could be really useful in business. It could be really useful in relationships. At the time, I really wanted it for relationships, but I didn't tell Chase that. I told him it was for business.
Why? Was it a mask that you put on?
No, I try not to use my stardom unless I have to, but with him being an author and releasing a new book, if I'm, and he's the chief of Navy, right? Like, I'm like, okay, if I just go to this guy and I'm like, hey, I want to learn all of this stuff because I want to be able to, see past all the BS in relationships and really know who I'm getting into a relationship with. I didn't think that was going to have the same as if I went on the business side. And I did want it for the business side as well. But with my industry, it's very mysterious to a lot of people, which just naturally makes it enticing and people want to know more. They're just a little like, okay, what is this? So I knew that if I was going to grab his attention, it would be a fast way to grab it. And it worked, and I got out there for the very first day that I was there. He picked me up from the hotel and like in less than 5 minutes, he knew that I don't know why I thought I was going to be able to wear a mask and like trick the number one behavior analyst in the world. But I naively thought that I was going to be able to just coast on, it's all about business. And within 5 minutes, I think we barely even made it to the first stoplight and he already knew. He was like, okay.
How could he tell?
He literally just called it. I hadn't said a word. He picked me up other than, pleasantries, and we're in the car and he was like, is everything okay? And I could just tell he was like, okay, some things, and I'm trying my best to act normal. But I had just so much anxiety built up and like I had all of these things that even in my own head, I'm like, okay, I want to learn about the business side and micro expressions and body language and, taking off the mask and that. But how am I going to pivot him to this other side, which is what I'm really here for? And he just could tell. I'm just
imagining how you're just asking around it. I mean, you're like, I'm just asking for a friend.
He literally flat out said, you do realize that like you hired me for body language and micro expressions. And he was like, so like, can we just skip this? Like basically, and I'm like, okay. And the truth is this, and I just came out with it. And I don't think he had to pivot a lot for it, but I think it definitely made him pivot. And at that time I was in a relationship with a narcissist. I want to be clear too, because a narcissist gets thrown around a lot, especially in today. It's kind of like one of those flag words that just everybody's tossing it around about. And
it is. It's because it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
We're all narcissists to a certain degree because we focus on ourselves, we wear a mask, whatever. But it's how much of a narcissist are.
Correct.
And so if you look at the symptoms list,
yes,
we all
and
have it.
This was a true NPD. I mean, narcissistic personality disorder, 100%. And I thought that, if I could just love him through it. If I just love him, like I can change all of this, Miss Fix It.
I can fix him.
Yes, I can fix it. And not so much, but, I was 3 years into the relationship at that point, and I was really questioning reality at this point. I had been gaslit to no ends. Every possible tactic, triangulation, hoovering, love bombing, gaslighting. Like you name it, it was happening. I was this really confident girl, but 3 years into this relationship, I am so detached from what is really happening. I didn't trust myself anymore. Mm-hmm. And so very quickly, Chase dove into that. And I realized that first week, because we did immersive, we did about a week and we did every single day. And it was all day,
just you and him.
Yes, just me and him.
Wow.
And, very quickly, I gained confidence because I realized, okay, I'm not crazy, first of all. Like, this is really not okay. Mm-hmm. But I drank the wrong juice. So just like you can drink the juice of somebody like Tony Robbins, NPDs are very charismatic a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And they're enticing and they can be addicting. And yeah, they may have all of these bad traits, but they didn't start with the bad traits or you would have been hightailing it the other way.
Yes.
And so I was sucked into the vortex. And I quickly realized like, okay, I see a path out of this vortex. And not only do I see a path out of it, now I know how to deal with one. Mm-hmm. So that was really what Chase honed in is you're in one right now. So right now, this isn't just about being able to identify one, but what do you do when there's one in your life that you can't necessarily get away from or say, I don't want to talk to you and walk out the door and never see him again.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I think there's people out there who have family members, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. They're still connected to and kind of have to be connected to, mm-hmm. right? So is that the main thing you learned? The how to spot a narcissist, how to deal with them? Or
how to deal with them, how to spot them.
What are the specific things? What are some specific things that you learned?
So there's certain things that you can exploit without someone really realizing it with questions and reading their micro expressions and their body language. And you can ask questions a certain way or just make statements. You're not even asking a question, but you're letting them finish a statement. People love to correct people. So if you purposely say something that's wrong, give them the opportunity to fix it.
Okay.
To correct it.
So based on where they go with the correction, you can tell what's going on in their mind. So
not just where they go, because with really analyzing somebody's behavior, you're looking at all things. You're looking at, of course, their micro expressions. So you have blink rate. You have, are they piercing their lips? And it's not any one particular thing, because this is my favorite thing that I get, that people are like, oh, if somebody's doing this, then that means that they're closed off. No, it may just genuinely be cold in the room.
yes.
And so context is important. And there's no one thing that will hit a high stress. Now, on the BTOE of Chase's, behavior table of elements, he has all of these different body languages. And, so there's, crossing your legs. There's the way you have your cross your legs. There's digital flexion. There's, are they chest breathing? Do they have asymmetry in their face? Is there a smirk? Is there an eyebrow raise? Is there, all of these various things. And you have to put them all together with a minimum of 4.
You have to see 4 signs for it to be relevant.
Consistently.
Okay.
So, and it's right after a question or right after you're purposely trying to exploit something.
Damn.
You're watching within seconds of how are they taking that question? What are they doing?
You're a savage. I'm just imagining you with a notepad just like asking your narcissist ex, like, so what about this? And then you're just like looking for the signs and you're just like writing them down.
Well, that's the thing is your notepad has to be in your brain, right? Because you have to do it in a way that they don't even realize it's happening.
So what are some of those questions or statements that you made or asked?
Well, that's individual to the person. So to give you an example, one of my favorite things that I love to start with is asking somebody to recall a happy memory that they have, which I'll ask you, what's a happy memory you have?
A happy memory. Yeah, I can think of a few.
Okay, name it.
Just like, I don't know, me and a girl going on a date. Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was great.
What made it special?
I don't know, just making memories together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular ones?
Going on a hike and just watching the city skyline.
And what was the feeling?
A little bit of fear.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. And just, I don't know, just aliveness.
Okay. And are you still with her?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay, so what I did in all of that was I'm looking at your blink rate. I was looking at what you did with your fingers, even down to you moving your foot. So there's things that we do that's like fidgeting. It's like a release of energy, but they also can mean certain things. Also where your eyes went. So, a lot of like recalling, like you look up. But if something's positive or negative is unique to each person. So you can look left if something's positive to you, but maybe if something's positive to me and I'm recalling something positive, I look right.
Yeah.
So in your mind, you have to be watching all of those things and you are building a unique profile just for that person. Because if she was in here and say I was questioning her and I'm trying to get behind her mask, I'm going to ask similar questions, but I'm going to get very different micro expressions and body responses and things like that. So pupil dilation is usually something that happens when we are either attracted to somebody or we're talking about somebody that we're in love with, somebody that we really like. Same thing can happen if you're looking at a picture of puppies. So that's just something naturally that kind of happens. Breathing, deep breaths, hesitations, all of those things builds. Is he uncomfortable talking about this? Is there any part of this that he doesn't want to talk about? Is he trying to keep it private? Is he being open about it?
I'm trying to keep it private.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
It was very clear.
Yes.
Very clear.
I should have gone with a different happy memory, like a family one or something.
Yeah, yeah. But it also goes to show that was where you went.
Yeah.
So that also tells me something as well. And then you look at, does somebody use I statements or we statements? All of these things build a profile. So the idea is in less than 5 minutes, I could ask you very, ambiguous questions, really, that, are surface level questions, but I don't need to get deep. Because when you ask deep questions, that can actually put somebody's guard up.
Yeah.
But surface level questions, one of Chase's things that he loves to do is like being in the car with an Uber, like you're getting an Uber and just practicing in the car with an Uber. And there's things that you can get from all of that. But the idea, if you really dive deep into Chase's work, is that you can utilize enough of those tools and with practice that you can get behind somebody's mask in less than 5 minutes.
Meaning you build a map of what they usually do.
You want to build a baseline.
Yeah.
Because there's certain things, even like people have tics. People have certain things that they do. And if you're counting that as on the stress chart as, possibly they're hiding something or whatever, you're going to get a wrong calculation because you keep adding in this tick that's happening. But that's just their baseline. They'd be doing that no matter what.
Yeah.
So you have to look at all of those different things.
So it helped you in that relationship because you probably spotted some lies and some things. But I think by that point, you probably knew, okay, I need to.
Oh, I got out of it really quick.
I need to get away from this.
Yeah, I was out of it really quick, but I was definitely able to have the upper hand without him even realizing that I had the upper hand. So that was really helpful. And then getting out of it, I dived so deep into it. One of the other, as far as narcissism, there's a book called Rethinking Narcissism by Craig Malkin. And I read that book and I ate it up and I ended up reaching out to him. One of the things I do is if I really like a book, and I will find the author and I will do everything in my power to get in direct contact with them and have them coach me one-on-one.
Wow.
So that's what I did with Chase. That's what I did with Craig Malkin. There's a handful of other ones out there that, you can read 100 books and maybe you got some kind of information out of some of them, but every once in a while you get that golden nugget where you just can't put it down. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I'm just going to read a couple chapters.
Yeah.
It's 4 a.m. and I haven't put the book down and I'm like, I can't stop, Those are the books that I'm like, I'm finding the author. I will do whatever it takes. I will figure out how to pay whatever rate to make it enticing for them to teach me one-on-one.
And I think there's so many authors out there who don't usually do that. They don't have a program. They don't teach people.
Yeah, and Chase didn't have one at all. That was one of the first things he said. He was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't do this. And I'm like, but if you did.
Yes. You used some tactics on him already.
Yes, but if you did.
That's something that Tony Robbins says too, where people are like, I don't know. Well, if you did know, what would it be?
Right.
Right. Is there another specific instance where what you learned through Chase helped you in business, in your career, in your life? Like, are there specific moments where you're like, okay, I just spot a lie?
Absolutely.
What were they?
So that is, pretty much once you get out of the relationship part and you feel really confident about that, you've got that on lock. The next rampant place is business. People are constantly trying to get deals. They're in for their best interest. Not everybody's trying to work a fair situation. They're trying to get the absolute most that they can possibly get out of you. And no holds barred, like, do you, But if I know that is the predominant kind of dog eat dog, or I'm smiling to your face, I know I'm overcharging you, but you don't know that I'm overcharging you, then why not? Is kind of like that mentality, unfortunately. And negotiation too. So speaking of finances, financial advisors versus financial fiduciaries versus one of the first things that I did that I thought, which I'm not going to say is a bad place to start. I just advanced past it. But one of the first things that I did when it came to investing was I just walked into Bank of America and I said, do you have an investment department? Like, I've had my accounts with you guys since 16 and I don't have a Roth. I don't do I need a SEP? Like, I don't even know how to start a brokerage account. Like, what am I doing? Can somebody help me? And they're like, oh, absolutely, we can, and they take me in this very professional office, and it looked great, and it made me feel good, and I was electrified, and I was motivated. And it took me a year to realize, okay, that wasn't a bad start. I was definitely getting my toes wet, and it was very easily accessible to me, but there were so many other better options that I could do. So I went to my next financial advisor, had them for a while. That was great. It was definitely the next step. But then when I started reading Tony Robbins' which, by the way, have you read his 3 books on, like money?
I'm too scared of it.
Oh my God, don't
It's a weapon. Money Master the Game. I read Unshakable. Unshakable, isn't that just, the summary is just invest in index funds?
It's a bulk of it. I'll say it is a bulk of it.
Money Master the Game.
Money Master the Game knocked me on my butt. I mean, that was one of those books I could not put down. And that was when I was like, 100%, I'm getting rid of a financial advisor. I'm going for financial fiduciary. And again, I don't want to say that it's bad to have a financial advisor. I just think that as you start investing, it goes in steps.
Yes.
It's kind of like that branch bank is where I'm starting because I don't know anything. Then I'm going to go to a private financial advisor. And then I feel like that next step is going to a financial fiduciary.
Yeah. Financial fiduciary, the difference is that they are legally required to have your best interest in mind.
Correct. So it's kind of like an attorney for finances.
You mentioned before that you went to all these Tony Robbins events. You loved his stuff, and you were called up on stage. Yes. What happened?
Oh, heavens to Betsy.
He broke you down in front of everyone?
Yes, he did.
Okay, tell me. I want to hear that. What was that like?
It was, honestly, I was so naive. I didn't even realize that he was breaking me down until I was probably an hour into it.
Wait, it was an hour long?
It was over an hour.
It was over an hour. Date with Destiny, that's specifically the event where he does interventions, where he's like, who is suicidal? And then 12 people raise their hands, and then he works with them one-on-one. And I've been to Date with Destiny. Incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
So I was at the section where he was talking about you have the circles in your life. So you have like your work, and you have family, and then you have your personal life. And those circles, as you kind of want them a little bit overlapping each other, but you want those circles to be kind of even as the goal. At different parts in your life, though.
Even meaning they are evenly developed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Allocated. So I didn't agree at the time.
You didn't agree that they need to be.
I did. Yeah.
So your finances were shit, and you were like, I don't need, or something wasn't well developed.
Right. So out of the 3 circles, one of my circles, I saw no need to have it even with the other ones.
Which was?
It was personal relationships.
Interesting.
So I was so focused on the business side, and I was so focused on self-development. I didn't see that this family, friends, part needed to be just as equal. And so I raised my hand and said so. It was, not like blatantly like, I disagree with you. It was more like, I hear you, but I feel like at different stages in your life, it is, very natural and beneficial to have those circles be different sizes. And he kind of explained, to tell me why it was correct. And I was like, I still don't agree. And that's where it started.
That's where the problem
And that's where the problem lies. And so he did an intervention, and because there's really no other way to call it, he started asking very direct questions and different aspects. And at the time I was at the, we all had the name tag. Well, mine just said Rachel. It didn't have a last name. And the thing was, at that time, you couldn't Google my real name. And so, and I was already, getting a lot of recognition and getting recognized everywhere that I went. So I didn't want to put my real name on there, and then somebody recognized me as Rachel, and then they know my real name. So I said Rachel, but I also didn't want to draw attention to me, being an adult film star. So I didn't want to put Rachel Starr. So I just put Rachel. Well, out of 5,000 people, I'm the only one that has a first name and not a last name. So he honed on real quick. And he's like, and Rachel, what are we doing about this? Like, so he was so clever. The way that he just pulled things out of me, because I didn't want to say, I refused to give my name. And the way that he did it is he started going down this track and just kind of bouncing all over the fact. And he was like, when you're, when your parents are really mad at you when you're little, and they yell at you from the other room, what do they call you? And I was like, oh, my mom would yell, Brady Michelle Harger. And he got me. And I was like,
that's so funny.
And I was like, literally just caught. I was like, oh my God. And the whole crowd just starts laughing because he just got me right there.
Here's the thing. He knows those tactics that Chase knows. And I don't know, compared to Chase, how much he knows, but I mean, he's incredible at that. Like world class.
Yeah.
How many people was that in front of? Just for the context for people listening. It must have been thousands.
Huge.
Right?
I mean, it was at the JW Marriott in Scottsdale.
It's thousands of people.
Over 3,000. It could have been up to 5,000. I mean, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did that continue?
So that was actually how I met my third mentor. So Ed
Gotta catch them
was
all.
there with his oldest son, and he was listening to my story. And, Tony Robbins just kind of beat me up and humbled the ever-loving what out of me, and then build me back up.
How did he do that?
Oh, just all of the things that he got into to kind of challenge my original question, that I didn't think that these circles should be, even. And I thought that, family and friends was a pin dot. And I'm like, I am focused on my career, and I'm focused on setting up my future. And this is the only thing that matters right now. And I mean, no spirituality. Like, I was missing birthdays and anniversaries and baby showers. I didn't care about any of that. Holidays, I wasn't coming home. Like, I was like, I wasn't returning phone calls. If my brother called me, I was returning it 2-3 days later. I mean, it was literally, I lived and breathed work. And that was my only focus. And I thought that, for my goals, that was what it had to be. And at that time, there was no way that you were going to change my mind. I knew I was on the right path for me, and I wasn't being very open to anything else. I just made up my mind. Well, Tony Robbins is really good at, it doesn't matter how much your mind is made up in something, he can refute it.
He will crack you open.
Oh my gosh. And that's what he did.
How did he do that? What clicked for you finally?
Oh gosh, we went down so many avenues. Because when I tell you, I had that microphone for well over an hour. He went into family life. He went into business. He went into my name. He went into childhood and trauma and where my untrust started, where my tenacity started. He had to kind of go into all of those things because he needed to understand who he was talking to. Because I think he realized that no matter how much he told me, no, this is the way to be, I'm a why person. And so either you're going to explain to me exactly why you are saying that, because I'm not going to take what you're saying at face value.
Yeah.
And I think he knew that. And so he had to break apart numerous different aspects of my life from childhood on up into present, and then circle it back around and tie it in a pretty little bow. And at the end of it, I was like, oh my gosh, he's right.
Mm-hmm. So what was your belief after that?
My belief after that was that friends are extremely important. Family is extremely important, whether that's your blood family or not. I know some people, maybe they're adopted, or maybe grandma raised them, or, so whatever you consider your family to be. Yeah. It is very important. Friendship is important. Intimate relationships are important. And they are all so dynamic. And they build your character as you get older. I mean, you're constantly learning, because in business, everything is very kind of black and white of what you get kudos for. It's everything's taken at face value of success is very easily measured. But in relationships, it's not, because every relationship is different. So it's a lot harder to measure the success of various relationships that we have because they're subjective. Business is objective. It's very easy to calculate if you're on the right path or not. But when something is subjective, it's the eye of the beholder.
Interesting. So that was your biggest breakthrough. Any other breakthroughs that stood out to you?
The health. I mean, in Date with Destiny, he does go which was a lot deeper than the Unleash the Power Within, the 3 days. So in that Date with Destiny, what does he spend? I think it's 2 solid days just on the health part. And that broke me wide open. And I mean, I didn't even know what raw veganism was. I didn't know I was learning spirulina, blue algae, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know what any of this stuff was. I was a very Texas meat and potatoes girl.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that you grew up in a cult.
Yes.
You just casually dropped that.
Yes.
What happened?
So before my parents divorced, my mom was born into it. And my dad, for lack of a better term, married into it to be with my mom. And so it had no name. It's not even called a church, called meetings. And there are chapters all over the nation, worldwide. They're everywhere. It's quite large. But I can't, it's hard to even explain it because there's no name to it.
It's almost like not having a last name and going to a conference.
Exactly.
Yeah, who would do that?
Yeah. So there's that. And, it was a big moment for me. We really are, for lack of a better term, we are computers that programs are constantly being downloaded into us, that we don't know any better, especially, from the time that we're born. That 6-7-year-old range is huge. I mean, you're basically just crazy downloading programs that maybe we have to undo later, and maybe we don't. Maybe some of these programs are good and maybe some of them aren't. But all of these programs are getting downloaded in. Well, when the interesting thing about when you're born into something, you don't know any different.
Yes.
And everybody else is happy and everybody else seems to accept it. And we don't want to think our caregivers would put us into something that was toxic or unhealthy or something that was going to hurt us later. We just automatically assume through survival that, well, this just must be the way.
And you were born into it.
I was born into it, yeah. And so it wasn't until my parents started going through their divorce and my dad massively shunned away. I mean, he was like, I don't want any part of it. And
how old were you then?
I was 9. And that was a shock to me because for the first time I'm questioning, well, if he doesn't want anything to do with it, what's wrong with it? And before it was like, the question was, well, what's everything that's right with it? And cults want you to think that level. They want you to be in the mind frame of everything that's right because they want you to fight for it. Our way is the best way. So you are raised only asking, well, what is everything right about what I've been raised in versus is there anything wrong with this? And that was the first time that I did. And I had a lot of questions.
Yeah. So you're spiritual, you're not religious. When did you get out of the cult?
So they divorced when I was 9. My mom continued to still go until like my mid-teen years. And then at that point, I really, in the cult, like they don't want you to ever go to another church. So they don't want you to go to a Catholic church or a Pentecostal church or a non-denominational. They damn sure don't want you going into a Buddhist temple or, asking about, other religions for sure. But I started doing all those because my dad was like, I don't want anything to do with that. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's wrong, I need to start asking some questions. What's the right one? If this isn't right, I got to find the right one. Holy shit, And so I didn't know a lot of people. And so I just started getting books in the school library and just started poking around. And then I realized this is deep. This is going to take me years to figure this out. And I don't know if I'm ever going to figure this out, but I know I don't want to go back there. So I kind of started distancing myself, and then it kind of through osmosis. Like my mom started like pivoting away. By my mid-20s, I started resonating a lot with Buddhism. Not that I'm Buddhist. Again, I take from all And I love the stories and the lessons, and I just use what feels good to me, what feels pure.
You pick the holidays that you want.
I like that. I'm going to steal that.
Yes.
But so I started really gravitating towards the lessons of Buddhism. And so I really started talking to my mom a lot about it. And before I knew it, she started to get curious. And she's like, why don't you just give me a few books? I was like, okay.
Ooh.
And I never thought that my mom would do that.
You're a real
but
inconvenience to that cult. I like it. Damn it, she's getting people out.
Yeah. So, but I've always been an inquisitive mind, and I've never been able to just accept what was handed to me on a platter. It's like, okay, well, it's not that I don't like what's on the platter, but well, who's getting what on their platter? And well, why do I have this one? Well, is this the best one for me? Well, where are the options? I'm just a why person, very critical thinking, very analytical. And it's my home. I love to dig into the details. Philosophy can just keep me entertained for hours. I love the questions. I love mulling things over. And I think that that's been a big success in my life, is not just taking what was given to me on a silver platter, not just believing whatever I'm told, I mean, could you imagine if we just logged into Google and just Googled random things and we just took the very first thing and said, oh, that's fact? Oh, I mean, we'd be up shit creek fast,
Yeah.
I want as many references as possible. I want to research as many things as possible. I want to hear as many different angles as possible. And I don't think that there's any one right way for any particular person. I think the right way is you figuring out your way, because my way may not be your way.
Yeah. How did the upbringing in the cult affect you? In bad ways, good ways?
The first thing that comes to mind, ironically, is good ways. The community.
You've trained yourself also to look at the bright side of things, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Having done all the work that you've done?
Yes. So the community was huge. I mean, these people cared. I mean, if your car broke down, it wasn't, it was all hands on deck. When it came time, we're going to cook and we're going to have this reunion or whatever. I mean, it was all hands on deck, and it was laughter and love and hugs and joy and, beauty. Just really pure. I think it's filled with people that genuinely want to live their best lives. They're just doing it in the only way that they know how, or what they see as righteousness through God. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if that's your juice, drink it. Go for it. And I drank it for a long time, and it was fantastic. It tasted great. But then I had questions, and I wanted to know what other flavors are there. Is this the only juice I want to drink for the rest of my life?
It's funny because it sounds like you say that now, after the breakthrough with Tony. Because when you were in your mid-20s, you were like, oh, relationships, family, doesn't really matter.
Yeah, well, but see, we're talking about spirituality here versus relationship and family. Although there is the community there, spirituality, I think, it's a different circle. You can have spirituality without family, and you can have spirituality without work. I mean, it really is its own circle. I think that after my mid-20s and I started digging and looking at all kinds of things, I think I was more confused than I was anything. And that kind of scared me, but I wasn't done digging. I just needed to put a pin in it. I was like, I still need to work. I need to make a living. I need to build a career. So this is over here. It's definitely in the back of my mind, but I just need to put a pin in that.
Yeah. What were some of the bad ways?
The bad ways were the deep ingrainment of women not having a voice, and that permission needs to be had, and that there's a hierarchy. There's a shame in how is it going to look on others if you even ask this question. So it was being extremely careful of what question am I going to ask, and is it appropriate to ask it. That can be limiting.
Yes.
For the rest of your life, if that's the program that's in your head from a very young age. And there's people pleasing in that.
Yeah.
To a big degree. And survival of, I don't want to be cast out.
And you're not a people pleaser.
I am not a people pleaser.
So in your DNA, you're a rebel. You ask questions. You want to know why.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a bit stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was not made for you, that cult, at
No,
all. So
no.
do you think that's what got you into the adult industry?
I think the adult industry, how deep do you want to go on that? Because that's an interesting psychological stance.
Let's dive into it.
Okay.
Let's.
Okay. So I was working. So I graduated high school by going to a self-paced school. The regular curriculum, not for me.
Of
I was
course.
totally bored with it.
Yeah.
Couldn't stand it. And I went to my mom and I'm like, I need a self-paced school stat. I need to get the hell out of here. I wanted to start working immediately. And I've always been a workhorse. So she helped me. I graduated my last 2 years of high school in 5 months. So I'm ready to hit the ground running. Get my apartment, got my car. I immediately, very quickly find 3 jobs. So I'm working 3 jobs from 16 to 18. And the only day that I took off was Sunday. Just really, and that was just to catch up on sleep because on average I was getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. And I was doing good at saving money. I was doing good at paying all my bills, roof over my head, all of the things. But all I kept thinking was, 2 of these jobs are data entry and one of them is sales. But they're very kind of entry level. How do I move up? Like, do I want to work 3 jobs for the rest of my life? Like, that's not going to work. How am I ever going to, if I'm working 3 jobs, how am I going to have time to go to college? I'm already only getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep. There's no college that's just on Sunday. And then I wouldn't even have time for homework. So it was a really big question to me. So I go through 2 years of this and finally I called my dad and I'm like, Dad, help me out. And now my dad is a Southern cowboy at its finest. And he's the kind of man that when he speaks, you listen.
Mm-hmm.
Very stoic, very stoic, and playful, but stoic first. And his favorite thing that he always said to me is like, if you want something bad enough, you'll figure it out on your own. So my dad was very big about figure it out, get resourceful. I'm not going to give you all the answers because this world isn't going to give you all the answers. You need to figure out how to be resourceful.
Damn. Sounds like a great dad.
Yeah, he was awesome.
I think, especially nowadays, a lot of parents helicopter their kids. And I think telling that to a daughter, just figure it out.
Yeah.
It just places a level of trust in you that assumes
oh my God,
you got
I love that you say that. I didn't even hit that kind of part of my brain of even realizing the amount of trust he was putting into me until I was probably in my 30s. Not that I ever disliked the way that my dad did it. It just never even hit me how much trust and faith and belief that he had in my own capabilities to just be like, figure it out. I'm not going to give you the answers. You need to figure it out. And wow, like that felt good,
It does. And the opposite, even when one is concerned about a friend, like if I have a friend and he's like, seems to be struggling and I'm just like asking him, hey, how you doing with that? Like any way I can support you with that? It sounds supportive, but it assumes that he's not capable. And it affects that person's self-esteem, I think, especially with parents.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. So backstory. Okay. So I was working 3 jobs and he's like, I'm not going to give you any answers. And he's like, if you want it bad enough, you'll figure it out. I'm like, geez, Dad, like, I'm not asking you for the answers, but a little bit of guidance would be nice. Like maybe a direction and then I'll go down the rabbit hole. And so he was kind of in his playful side and he was like, I mean, Brandy, if you want it bad enough, you are going to figure it out. You're telling me that you don't have enough time. You have the money to pay for it, but you don't have enough time. And he's like, the only reason you don't have enough time is because you don't want it bad enough. And I was like, come on. Like, I'm really pressing him. So I'm going to do that little girl wrap daddy around my little pinky. But Dad, and I was pulling out every stop I could. He still wasn't having it, but the jokester in him, I do not believe that he meant this to actually happen. But he goes, well, you love music. You could always work at an adult cabaret. I didn't even know what that was.
I don't know what that is.
I was like, what's that? And he was like, he starts laughing. And he's like, oh, a strip club. I'm like, Dad, seriously, come on. I'm asking you for a little bit of guidance and you're telling me a strip club. And he was like, well, you do like the music. And I'm like, can you be serious for 1 second? And really the way that it ended was, no, I'm not going to help you. You are going to have to figure it out. I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm not going to guide you. You're old enough. You need to make your own path. Get off the phone. I happened to be next to my girlfriend that was listening to the conversation. And she was like, girl. She was like, that's brilliant. I'm like, what's brilliant? I didn't even get an answer. She was like, oh, yeah, you did. Adult cabaret. And I'm like, you can't be serious. And she's like, well, we don't have to be strippers. She's like, we could just be waitresses. And she goes, think about how much money they make. She's like, you could just have one job instead of 3. She's like, we could go to college during the day instead of night classes. So now my wheels are turning. And I'm like, huh, you know what? You're right. So we immediately, back in that day, pull out a phone book. And we're like, what do you even call a strip club? And he said cabaret. Okay, let's look at that. And then you see gentlemen's club. And next thing I know, we're getting the address and we're going up there and we're interviewing. And they're like, well, yeah, you can be a waitress. So I get there and in 1 hour, basically, I decided, okay, I've made $2 or $3 in 1 hour. And I'm looking at what a girl made on stage and she's got, $40 in, her little garter and whatever in one song. And I'm like, okay, smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first thing I did. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm such a daddy's girl. I called my dad. I was like, so I need to tell you something. And I've always been the black sheep too. So it was shocking, but not shocking that I said this to him. And I was like, so you know how you said to go work at an adult cabaret? Well, kind of went there and I tried to waitress. Didn't really work out. And I didn't make the money I thought I was going to make. So now I'm thinking about getting on stage. And my dad just kind of was like silent on the phone. He was like, I think he was like waiting for me to laugh, like it was a joke. And then when I didn't, he was like, oh my God, she's serious. And so he said, okay. He's like, well, I have 2 requests. I always want to know where you're going to be, what place you're working at. And he said, and the other thing is if you cannot get on that stage, stone cold sober, you don't need to be up there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I mean it. Every single time you work, if you are not 100% sober to get on that stage or doing whatever that job entails, you don't need to be doing it. Alcohol, drugs, anything. I was like, okay. He's like, you promised me that. And I said, I promise you that. 5.5 years, I never, not one time. I was always 100% sober. So wrapping that in, how did I get into the industry? I really thought that it was more, and I did. I went into Tarrant County College, and I started taking courses, and it was great. I was paying everything cash. I didn't want to take out loans. So I was doing exactly what I set my mind to. I'm going to go down this path. I can get rid of 3 jobs, just have one, start getting on my credits. And then just one day somebody came into the club and said, hey, like you have a perfect look to you. You're personable on stage. How would you like to take this to the next level and fly out to LA? And the long story short of that is obviously I said yes, because here we are. And it had more, how would you put it? It had more expansive growth. As an exotic dancer, there's nowhere to move up. That's it. There isn't a move up. In the adult industry, I saw this as, okay, this is being an actress. So maybe that could be crossover to mainstream. Maybe by being on this set, maybe I want to get into videographer. Maybe I want to become the director. Maybe I want to get into production. Like, I really don't know where this goes. Maybe I end up being a professional model and I'm in print and whatever else. But I knew there was expansive growth way more than what I was ever going to have as an exotic dancer. Now, that didn't work with my college classes, so I knew that I was going to have to give that up. But I didn't think I was going to give it up forever. I just thought, let me get a year into this. And maybe this gives me so much world experience. I'd also never been outside Texas. So I saw it as the travel opportunity. I saw it as endless opportunity to learn about the world, which in turn I knew would influence where my future was going to go. And I thought, I'll do it for a year. And if I, don't like it, then I'll go right back to college and doing everything that I was doing. But let me give it a year. I ended up loving it. And I learned so much so fast. And the adult industry is very much a community industry. It is family. I mean, they stick together. They are incredibly intelligent. They love to teach. Now, not everybody, okay? I mean, stereotypes are there for a reason, and if you don't believe it is, stick your hand in a fence with a pit bull, right? Stereotypes are there for a reason. But there's your outliers, and that was what I've always been. I've always had an eye for.
Yeah.
So once I got in that industry, I found who the outliers were, and that was who I latched onto. I'm like, gimme, 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 gimme. And I treated it like a business, and what my dad said is not drinking, not doing drugs, like being stone cold sober. I took and carried that into the adult industry. So it really was treating it like a business for me. And I called up my mentors that I had and I said, okay, look, I'm going into this. This is what I'm going to do. What is your best advice from a business perspective? How do I set myself apart? How do I have a leg up? And one of the first things that they said was, well, you got to trademark yourself, like your likeness. Like you need to protect yourself legally. You need to create LLCs. You need to do all these things. So out the gate, my first year, which most girls never create these things, never do these things, and not just girls, I'm sorry, male talent as well. And if they do, it's typically happening 5, 6, 7 years down the road because nobody teaches you that, in that industry unless you're seeking it out. But here I had all these mentors through Tony Robbins and outside of that industry and all these books that I've been reading and leadership and managing and discipline for yourself, and vision boards, right? So I just threw all of those tools together and I checked in with my mentors and I said, I want to do this right. Like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all the way. And so that's what I did.
So it sounds like the way that you got into it was purely because it just happened and the money was good and you saw a path to make good money.
It was opportunistic. It was, in my experience, to be successful, you can't be static. You have to be able to fall in love with change. You have to be able to fall in love with innovation. You have to fall in love with creativity. You do have to be strategic and disciplined and have grit, right? All of those things are great, but to really be successful in every single industry, no matter it's my mysterious adult film industry that, everybody thinks is this, black hole of a world that nobody knows anything about, or if you work at a bank, in every industry across the board, there are certain things, certain traits, certain characteristics that you want to have to be the absolute most successful that you can be in that.
What do you see are the biggest misconceptions about what people think it is and what it actually is, the adult industry? Because here's what I think. I think a lot of people think people who are successful with that, they just need to be hot and that's it and be willing to do it. But clearly you've worked so much on yourself and you're a savage. And so, yeah, and I think a lot of people also think, oh, like you must have some sort of trauma to get into that or whatever, right? And so what if that is true? What if that is completely wrong and it's actually something else?
Well, that's where I'm going to go back and say that stereotypes are there for a reason. You do have the girls that are hot and, bimbofication is a hot fetish. And unfortunately, you can be very pretty and be very successful. As far as your brand can be successful. Now, just because your brand is successful in my industry, because you have to understand it's your likeness, you've created a character. Let's take Mickey Mouse, for instance, right? Mickey Mouse, this cartoon, hasn't changed a lot over the years. But it was all of the fantastic minds behind that image that made Mickey Mouse successful. The drawing didn't make Mickey Mouse successful. The pretty girl does not make a successful brand. It's just the start. It's step one. So her brand can become successful, but she may not be successful. There's sharks in this industry. So they could exploit the ever loving crap out of her, pay her very low end rates, throw her into, high production companies or back end warehouses. It could get dangerous or it could be safe. So just because you're a pretty face, that's kind of almost like rolling the dice if that's the only thing that you're working with and there's no thinking power behind that. And that's a roll of the dice, in my personal opinion. To be successful, to me, the 1% of my industry, especially females, because the movie's all about them, right? The guy's kind of more like, a lot of times you don't even see his face, right?
Yeah.
We don't even know who the male stars are a lot of times. So let's just stick, for lack of a better term, we'll stick with female talent. For them to be successful, hope to God they're not addicted to drugs or alcohol and they're not dependent on some kind of substance that, alters their thinking and behavior. Hope to God they have somebody that's teaching them something as far as how to protect themselves legally, whether that's having an LLC or an S Corp or whatever it is that they're choosing to do. Somebody along the way, maybe in the beginning or at some point, is teaching them about trademarks. So they have not just USA, but, worldwide trademarking. Hopefully they're surrounding themselves with the right people, to help kind of build that brand. But to me, for someone to be truly successful, it's kind of like, I don't want to say you have to be born with grit, but it really has to be nurtured. I mean, there has to be something inside of you that just wants more. And you are willing to do what it's going to take to get more.
More money, success.
Whatever
anything.
It is, whatever your more is.
Where do you think that comes from? Were you born with it? Do you think we just grow up a certain way and there's a certain position we're put in, nature, nurture? What do you think it is?
I really see a lot on both sides of it, honestly. I really see a lot of it as how we're born, but I do see a lot of it as the environments that you grew up in. I mean, I can tell you one of the reasons that I have a lot of grit, especially when it came to finances, was when my parents divorced. My mom worked minimum wage. She'd never had to have a job before.
And you didn't want to be in that position.
And I didn't know. I mean, she did a pretty good job about keeping the electricity on, but sometimes it didn't. She did a pretty good job of making sure we had something to eat, but it definitely wasn't always appetizing. Maybe it was Spam in a can, maybe it was cereal. I mean, we had something. It wasn't like we were going hungry, but it and maybe it was the same day, 3, 4, or 5 days in a row. There wasn't variety. At the worst of it. And at a very young age, like I said, they divorced when I was 9. So from that 9 to 11 range, like really shaped a lot of the questions and how I looked at the world as either being prey to the outcomes or, for lack of a better term, predator. Either I'm going to take control or I'm just going to take what's thrown at me.
Eat or be eaten.
Yeah.
So growing up. That was growing up. You had, okay.
Yeah. And so that really kind of shaped a lot of my life at 9 and 11. And I remember looking at my mom and, 1, being sad that she was struggling so much. 2, wishing more for her. So it was very scary to me to think of, potentially marrying somebody and not working and not having anything to fall back on if that marriage doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that was scary. And then also not knowing, can I keep the electricity on? Am I going to have a roof over my head? Am I going to have food to eat? It was just constantly this hustle of survival rather than, as Tony Robbins would put it, the 7 Ps, right? Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
What was that?
Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So... And I didn't even know those terms back then, but I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, this was bad planning. This was bad not being prepared. we don't live in sunshine and rainbows. Like, we can positive think our way and, law of attraction all we want. But at the end of the day, I can't just say, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. I am a millionaire. I am a millionaire. I have $1 million in my bank. Like, that's cute. Like, save it. Okay. That's cute. It's adorable. There's another step. There is another step. And that's preparing. And it's, who do I have to become and what do I have to do? What do I need to change in my life to have the door open for this to fall into my life? For this to attract into my life, what do I need to change about me? Because I can't be a couch potato and eating Ruffles and hot dogs and watching, late night episodes of whatever garbage TV and saying, I am a millionaire. And tomorrow there's going to be $1 million in my bank account and that's going to happen. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It seems like it makes sense why you got into that. It's just the perfect combination. So your DNA is you're rebellious. You want to know why. You grow up in a place where women didn't have a voice. And of course, you cause a bunch of chaos, asking questions where you shouldn't. And then, you see your mom struggling. You're like, I want to be financially crushing.
Oh, yeah. I want to make sure that I never have to worry about my lights being on.
Yeah.
I never want to worry. Not only am I going to have a next meal, but how much the next meal cost. I don't want to have to think about that.
And then the door opened. I think where most people would stop is they would worry about what other people think. Because even nowadays, like, there's so many people who are afraid of starting a business or going after a dream job that maybe doesn't pay as much, but they wonder, what are my parents going to think?
I think that also has to do with what I saw. Nobody was paying my mom's bills. At the end of the day, she was working. I mean, she worked, very, fast food jobs, grocery stores, whatever she had to do. She did courier jobs. She did whatever she had to do. And if she was worried about how that looked or whatever other people thought, I mean, that would have made her stagnant and been one more thing that's not going to get her ahead. I mean, at least she had hustle, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Is it where she wanted to be? No, but sometimes you have to start where you don't want to be. Sometimes you have to be willing to do what others won't. And that will set you apart.
I just think that there are so many other paths one could have gone if they were like, hey, I want to make a bunch of money, or I want to be successful, and I want to have my own voice. I think what most people get stopped by is the judgment of others, and they may have gone down the business route. I think the one where you get the most judgment is going into the adult industry.
Oh, absolutely.
So I guess you just grew up, or your DNA was just, I don't care what people think, or is it something you developed? Because there's people out there who are afraid of starting their own business, and they think, oh, what if people judge me? Like, you just did the one where you get the most potential judgment, right? Is that something that you just never struggle with? You're like, I don't care what people think. Because especially coming from the cult, I mean, what would those people say, right? Or you just never cared.
I don't think that it's that I never worry what other people think. It's who. The only people, if I'm going to worry what they think, it's going to be the people that I actually have close, intimate relationships with and bonds with. But Joe Blow on the side of Main Street over here, I could give two shits what you think, because you're not paying my bills. I'm never going to see you again. What do I care what you think? Like, you have no basis in where my life is going or where it's going to end up and how it gets there. Now, the people that I do care about, to a certain extent, because even with them, you're not paying my bills.
So one of the questions that Tony always asks is, whose love did you crave most, right? And I'm assuming what it sounds like is that you said you were daddy's girl. And so your dad didn't have judgment, right? So that's what probably gave you permission to be like, you know what? My dad, he supports me in this, so I'm going to do it, right? And so that's why I think that's where it's difficult for most people to pursue that thing, because the people whose love they crave, they would judge them.
I think that's very insightful for you to say, because it is totally true. I think that when my dad divorced, again, at that pivotal age between 9 and 11, and then he's pushing away from that cult, and then I'm starting to question things, And I started to see my dad live a very different life than how we were raised because he's not bound by all of these rules and things that we have to live by. And I just saw my dad flourish. I saw him excel. And my dad was a natural born leader. Like he just, everything he touched, he ended up in a management position or, overseeing numerous states or, teaching. It was just, it was just natural born leader. And he could sell snow to an Eskimo, so he's just naturally gifted in that, very charismatic. I think he maybe made the mistake of living his life for somebody else and what they thought to even marry my mom, to even join. Think about what it would take. You're not born in the cult. You don't necessarily agree with everything, but you're madly in love with this woman. And the only way that you can marry her is you have to drink the juice or at least pretend to.
She must have been really hot.
I think my mom's pretty hot. But she's also uber intelligent, God, if I had a thimble of what she had in vocabulary and grammar and literature, she's very well read. But yeah, think about what it would take that, he was raised Pentecostal and, people have their opinions about, whatever denomination, but I'm sorry, it was a massive change. I don't care what denomination you're in, Baptist, Pentecostal. If you were trying to join what I was raised in, this is a whole other level.
Yeah.
This is another level. And we almost, I'm not going to say that it looks as crazy as Amish or something where we have little hats and, whatever. But dresses had to be down to our ankles. You're no cleavage, no makeup. You can't cut your hair. You no nail polish. Radios were taken out of people's cars. You weren't allowed to have TVs. Mm-hmm. We didn't believe in holidays. You can't put one day before another. It was so rigid, and you couldn't play sports. You couldn't. It was endless. Just keeping up with all the rules was endless. So he knew, getting it, this is another level that I'm getting into. But imagine making a conscious choice that you love somebody so much that you're going to either, I don't know if he really did, drink the juice or if he just pretended to have her. But then he was married to her for 13 years. And then you raised your kids in it.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah. It's funny that some people look at some personal development seminars and they think that's a cult.
Yeah.
And you know the contrast. And there's elements of it, right? There's elements of it where, you just go with it and it's a community. But I think the key thing is just you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to question things, right? So, yeah. You know the difference. What are some of the latest and greatest things that you're into right now? Because you're also a self-improvement junkie. You love that stuff.
Fitness is really big to me right now. And I don't just mean going to a gym because I've done that for years, especially as a model. But really the summertime for me is as many outdoor sports as I can possibly play. I'm totally addicted to pickleball. I've been a tennis player for 30 years. There's almost nothing that you could, I don't care if I'm going to a batting cage, if it's golf, top golf. I want to be outside. I want to be active. I want to breathe the fresh air. I'm very competitive naturally. And I love the camaraderie. I love that teamwork.
Any latest books or resources or anything where you're I wish I would have found this sooner?
Oh gosh, all of the David R. Hawkins books.
Which ones? That is Letting Go?
So there's Power versus Force. There's The Eye of the Eye. There's Transcending the Levels of Consciousness.
Are you into psychedelics?
I've tried them. I definitely did a lot living out in the country when I was younger. Shrooms were widely available. LSD was widely available. You kind of almost don't even have anything else better. If you are going to get in trouble out in the country, that's kind of the thing you do. So I definitely experimented a lot with that. Today, I couldn't even tell you. It's been years since I've done anything like that. But also, I think I did so much of that, especially in my mid to late 20s when I was really kind of, remember how I told you I put the pin in spirituality? When I untook that and I took that pin back, I went expansive. I mean, hippie stuff, spiritual stuff, DMT, lick a frog. What is all of this? Like, expand my mind. I wanted to try anything and everything without judgment. I think I felt so boxed in from being in the cult. I didn't want to stay. I think I had commitment issues. I was like, I don't want to be fully committed to any one thing, but I want to try all the things. What is that? Forrest Gump, life is a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I wanted to try all the chocolates.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try as many things and explore as many things as possible and then come up with my own. Like, what is my spirituality? And then that's what I'm going to live by. But the only way you can really do that is experience and try the things within reason, safety. Some of the things probably weren't exactly totally safe that I tried, but I'm still here and breathing. But yeah, definitely. And I think that I'm glad that now in the US that they're starting to research things like ketamine and shrooms for things like PTSD and CPTSD, depression, anxiety, all of those things. And I don't know exactly where that's going. It seems to be kind of split. It helps some people. It doesn't help others. But I'm glad that we're opening up to that. I will say that shrooms is definitely of all the things that I did try, it made me feel more connected with Mother Nature as one, like a oneness. And then also made me feel more connected with other humans as a oneness than any other thing that I've ever done.
Have you done a lot of personality tests? Like Myers-Briggs?
I did
like
before
that?
Chase Hughes.
Okay.
And there's one that I've recently done with my life coach. It's called Core Maps, CORE, like C.O, whatever, Core Maps. And I think that Core Maps is probably the highest and most accurate personality test that I've ever experienced. But yeah, before that, I was almost addicted to them. Like every personality, like, who am I? Right? Like how put me in a box,
You don't want to box yourself in too much where you're like, oh, this is me. You want to stay open-minded as well. It's a balance between the two. The way I experience you is very open-minded. And when you're not allowed to be, that just keeps pulsing.
Freedom is huge to me. Like I would, even the Date with Destiny, remember the vision board that we create with that? So one of the first ones that I did, I can't remember all four, but there's two that stick out because I put them on numerous other ones, was freedom. Remember the virtue? You have to do your virtues.
Yeah.
So freedom always stayed as one, and magnanimity stayed as another one.
Magnanimity. No idea what that is.
It's being able to forgive without pettiness.
Okay. Interesting. Why that?
Magnanimity, I think that there's no such thing as perfect, right? So, and what may be abrasive to me may not be abrasive to you. And I haven't walked in your shoes and different cultures and whatever else. So I think to have true empathy and connection between people, there has to be a lot of grace. And there has to be, within that grace, a forgiveness of, and I'm not saying forgiveness to where you're a doormat, to be clear.
Yeah.
But forgiving others just as much as you forgive yourself, but without pettiness is huge. Because you can forgive and be like vengeful. You could forgive or be like, But without pettiness means that you allow the grace to understand that wherever that person is at in their consciousness level and wherever you're at in your consciousness level, these two things just didn't vibe. And it doesn't make this person a monster. It doesn't make this person a saint. Because then you're getting into dualities, right? And as you know, in philosophy, dualities is one of the longest debated, things in philosophy. Light versus dark and good versus evil, all of these things. And to me, what Dr. David R. Hawkins would teach is, there's only good and then less than good, gradients of less than good. There's only light. There's no such thing as darkness. The sun doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Right? The sun's always there. It's just always there. But there's degrees of less sun. But if there was darkness, you can't just have light come from darkness. You can just take away from light. So the same thing in good, in consciousness level, there's gradients of good. There's your highest good, and then there's different levels that become less and less and less than good. If you can have a lot of compassion for where your consciousness level is versus somebody else's in absolute humility, you should be able to it should be easy to be magnanimous.
So for context for people, the virtues you set to guide your life, that's part of Date with Destiny. It's funny that you picked freedom as first, because I remember specifically Tony giving an example that you got to be careful which one you pick. Did he tell you that too? That freedom is like, he used to pick freedom as number one, but then he realized it can actually be counterintuitive, because what is freedom? Is it freedom not to pay your taxes? Well, then you don't have the freedom of not worrying about the IRS coming after you, right? So he was saying freedom is a difficult one. And of course, you picked that one, being rebellious.
And I kept it there. Well, even with it, because he 100% said that at the very first Date with Destiny
and you're just
too.
Like, why?
Right.
Why can't I pick that?
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I did. No, I didn't get a chance to raise my hand on that one. Dang. But to me, I'm a risk taker. And I always have been. I'm willing to take the risks. And I also think that I feel very confident that I have a good moral compass and good ethics as a solid foundation, that even if I'm going to put freedom as a virtue, it's going to be within my reason. I don't think my commander would allow me to just have so much freedom that it's going to, go off the rails. It's always going to be within reason for me.
Yeah. You know what freedom means to you and how you define it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually I would ask people, where can people find out more about you? What do I say here?
I think the best thing to say, the most PG thing to say is send to my Instagram at Rachel Starr, RachelStarr. Is probably the most PG thing that you can say for this platform.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
This was great.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.